Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra Toe, and I'm an assistant professor at Northeastern. And today I'm going to share my paper, They Just Don't Get It, Towards Social Technologies for Coping with Interpersonal Racism. I want to provide a brief content warning. This work, of course, looks at interpersonal racism, which is personal and sensitive, and I will be sharing a personal story from a study participant later on. As critical race theory tells us, interpersonal racism is a regular, everyday experience. Modern racism can be overt, but most often is subtle and embedded in our everyday context. Phrases such as, "your English is so good," or "you're so articulate," are some of the ways that modern racism is enacted. And racism often causes unpleasant and overwhelming uncertainty. It raises questions such as, did I imagine that? Am I taking this too seriously? What do I do, and how do I take care of myself in this situation? And experiencing racism on a regular basis is harmful in the short and long term to mental, emotional, and physical well-being. While it's important to combat racism, acknowledging that it's pervasive means we also need to devote time and attention to the ways that we can cope with and mitigate those negative impacts. Social support is known to be one of the best ways of coping with racism, but it's incredibly challenging. It requires vulnerability and self-disclosure, and requires finding the right people to talk to. Because racism is pervasive in our society, it is also pervasive in our technology, which makes it even more challenging to seek that necessary support. For example, online settings entail additional risks of harassment and hate speech to people of color, especially when speaking about race and racism. So, as an initial need-finding study, and to highlight and understand the current best practices of people who already deal with this on a regular basis, I conducted an interview study that asks, after experiencing racism, what kinds of social support seeking do people engage with and why? And what are the current opportunities and barriers for our social and communication technology in terms of providing that support? I interviewed 14 adults who identified as having experienced racism in hour-long sessions, conducting a narrative episode interview asking about their experiences with racism and with social support, followed by semi-structured interviews and surveys. I conducted a grounded theory analysis in order to understand the most prevalent themes. In total, I collected 52 discrete stories from those 14 participants, and the stories themselves ranged in both practical and perceived intensity. Towards that first question, I found that uncertainty motivated support seeking, in part because uncertainty is central to that emotional experience of racism. I'm going to provide a long quotation, but I'll be summarizing. One of my participants described parking his car in his neighborhood near his house when his neighbors called the police on him for suspicious activity. They approached in full force with weapons drawn, and he later found out that the neighbors who called are the ones who frequently babysit his daughter. Although he was able to safely exit that situation, even a year later, when describing the story to me, he still had questions. Why me? Why did this happen? How do I stop this in the future? And is my daughter safe with people who enacted racist violence on me? Social support can help through meaning making. Speaking to someone who gets it can help you resolve those uncertainties and answer those questions. However, speaking to the wrong person can cause even more damage when someone doesn't understand the situation and invalidates or even harasses the person who's describing the experience. Towards my second question, I found that a core barrier to using current technology is mistrust. Every participant was able to describe either a personal experience or the experience of a loved one where talking about racism online resulted in harm. That ranged again from subtle invalidations up through doxing, harassment, and the loss of job opportunities. This work taken together identifies many challenges for CSCW in exploring how to design anti-racist technology, how we might address uncertainty, how we might create safe, private, and easy to access social support, and how we can make technology that actually feels like it's made for people of color. I explore some of these questions in my future work using participatory design and community-based practice, and I encourage you all to read the full paper where you can read more firsthand accounts from participants and find ways of connecting this work to your own work in designing and studying anti-racist technology.